Hey there, Gary Parrish. Welcome back to the CBS Sports Eye on College Basketball podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting, dodo birds, and leaky black. Matt Norlander is here with me. If you're watching on YouTube, please smash the like button like you're Brandon Davies. You have consent. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the YouTube channel, please knock that out while you're here. Let's get into it. Seems like the appropriate place to start is by, we don't normally do this, but I like to mix it up every once in a while. Seems like the appropriate place to start is by revisiting this weekend's Final 4-1 picks. We picked 5 college basketball games per usual, plus the 2 college football playoff semifinals. You're the official scorekeeper of this thing. You want to tell folks how we did and what our updated records look like on the season?
You guys are both tied at 21, 15, and 1.
21.
And someone went 6-0-1 this weekend, to the surprise of everyone, probably including you, GP.
Can we get a little more specific? Who exactly went 6-0-1 this weekend?
You, sir. You went 6-0-1.
And what's my record now?
21, 15, and 1. Tied with Norlander, by the way.
21.
Wow.
You may do a little Rick's flex for you? You may do a little Rich flex for you? I'll hit a Rich flex for you. 21.
Nicely done.
21,
Even
21.
Steven heading into 23. So yeah, GP didn't take an L. We obviously both pushed because the Ken Palm projection was Kentucky by 23. That was the margin. I think Louisville Bass got in that final possession, actually got it inside the number, I think. So Louisville technically covered because it was 22.5 or 23.5, something like that. But congratulations on, over under 0.5 more perfect weekends without a loss for you. We're taking the under, right?
I think I've done it. But I certainly haven't done it often.
Yeah, I know. No, it's not necessarily easy, but hey, listen, proud of you.
It's a little bit like greens in regulation. I do it sometimes, but not a lot.
It's true. By the way, we did fold to the 2 football games into that, and you went 2-0, and I went 0-2. It was a fun. We're gonna get plenty of Saturday hoops we got to get to here, but obviously New Year's Eve was capped off by those games, and it was the best pair of semifinal college football games we've had since the CFP became a thing. Almost a decade ago. So that was great to see, and certainly really surprising. I had a buddy who apparently he took, I don't know what he bet to what, and I don't know if this was a parlay or whatever from other stuff. He had Ohio State and TCU money line. I think he had something else, but he was going to win 1,800 if Ohio State just had to win the game money line. And I don't know if he hedged, and eventually I don't know all that stuff. I was on a text thread, and then it was like TCU won, and then it's like 1,800 if Ohio State does this, and I was like, you need to get out of that. But he didn't, and so there we go.
I went to bed thinking Ohio State won. I woke up this morning genuinely surprised. I didn't mean to fall asleep during the game, but I went downstairs and sank into the couch with the family, and just next thing I know, my eyes were asleep. And then I woke up at some point, and I went to bed, and I woke up this morning and got a cup of coffee like I do, and went to do the top 25 and won. And I was like, well, what? Georgia came back and won that game. So I rewatched the last 7 minutes earlier today. They were re-airing it on one of the ESPN stations. So that was quite the football game. It was really quite the college football playoff semifinals. We haven't had great semifinals in that sport often, but right. those 2 games yesterday were both tremendous, and now it sets up a national championship game. Georgia, TCU, I believe the Bulldogs opened as 13-point favorites.
We will pick that game on the next Sunday edition, I think, because the CFP title game is always on a Monday. So a week from now, we'll pick that. A couple quick things. One, you buried the lead. Okay, you were asleep for the old Central Time Zone ball drop.
I was. Yeah. It was I didn't mean to be sometimes I get tired, Sometimes I just fall asleep.
That's true.
I don't have a problem falling asleep. I have a problem staying asleep.
Okay.
but going to sleep, it works pretty easily for me.
My wife rallied. It was about 10:15 and it wasn't looking so good. We watched made the time pass. We had the football game on the main TV, and then we watched the 1 hour Murderville Netflix thing with Will Arnett. Have you watched that show?
This is going to start one of the episodes. This is going to start to sound like a pattern. I turned it on one night. Okay. Fell asleep. Yeah, never went back to it. I tell you what, and we're going to get to basketball in just a second, but like you watch TV shows, and I'm sure other people listening right now watch TV shows. I had let's just start here. Have you ever heard the show I Hate Susie? I Hate Susie too. I had never heard of it. All right. And back on my radio show, every day at the end of the show, it's like, what's the biggest game tonight? What are we watching on TV? And I've got this page I go through, and it tells me like when stuff's premiering or special episodes. And I can always find something to reference for that TV category. And like a few weeks ago, it was like season 2 of I Hate Susie 2 launches or something like that. And I was like, what is, I've literally never heard of it. And I went and looked at it on Rotten Tomatoes, and it got incredible reviews. And then I Google searched it. Like the first thing that came up was I Hate Susie is the best TV show you're not watching. And so I went and watched the whole first season because I got a little free time now that I didn't used to have. And it's great. Check out if you're I Hate Susie. It's on HBO Max. I finished this first season earlier today. 2 thumbs up. 2 thumbs up for me.
That's good to know. Where was I? Oh yeah. Okay. So did make it to midnight, and here we are, 2023. Another year of this podcast. Thank you for joining us on this Sunday. Never miss a Sunday show. We appreciate you here. And I was thinking when TCU won, feels like in the major American college sports landscape, TCU is the first team of its ilk to play for a national championship. You know, national underdog, unexpected team to get there. When you look at the context of the greater sport, preseason polls, I think since a guy named Stevens was coaching a school named Butler, and they did that in back-to-back seasons. This is a trivia time real quick. All right. Butler made back-to-back championships, right?
I'm aware, yes.
You were there. You were there. Do you remember that?
I do remember being at both.
You remember being at, you swear?
I remember being at Butler's, I believe, Elite 8 game the second year when they won to go to the Final Four for the second straight year. And I remember having this moment, just like I'm on the court and they're celebrating, and I sort of make eye contact from a distance, like a romantic movie, eye contact with a from a distance. I lock in with Brad Stevens. So it's just me and Brad Stevens staring at each other across the court.
I'm sure that was it. And
that's exactly what it was. And you know, he looked at me, and you know what he said? Can you believe this? He looked right at me and said, "Can you believe this?"
He did not.
I swear to God, that's a true story. Why would I make up a Brad Stevens story?
Why is Brad Stevens looking at you and saying, "Can you believe this?"
We locked in.
This is winning the national semifinal to get it done. He's locking eyes with you.
No, it was a win in the Elite 8 to go to back-to-back Final Fours. I believe. I believe.
Who'd they beat? This is not part of the trivia time. Who'd they beat? If it's that vivid to you, who'd they beat?
No idea.
Yeah, okay. Can't remember the game. Can't remember the city. The second one. Can you name either of the ones? They had in back-to-back years, they had epic Elite 8 games. Well, one of them was more epic than the other.
UMass Lowell.
Okay. Kansas State was the first one. Florida was the second. Here is my trivia time. Can you name the seeds that Butler was in both of those seasons?
I want to say one of them, they were like a 7 seed. 8 seed? Weren't they a 7 or an 8 one year?
You lose.
And then maybe an 11?
You lose.
I don't know.
5 seed when they played Duke.
Yep.
And then they were an 8 seed. You said 7 first. They were an 8 seed when they got back there. Remember, first round, they had that tussle, crazy ending against Old Dominion. Shouts to the late, great Andrew Smith, who played a big role in the end of that game before playing another close one against Pittsburgh, getting on through Wisconsin, Florida, VCU, and then beating Connecticut in what's universally regarded as the ugliest and most aesthetically unappealing championship game in the history of the men's NCAA tournament. Hopefully, Georgia TCU is much more watchable than that one. As a casual college football observer, this is plenty fun. I would have been good with any title game matchup, to be honest, but TCU being in it gets me that more interested and engaged. I think it's an awesome, awesome story. Actually, as it so happens, one of my next door neighbors, she graduated with a nursing degree. She works locally here at Yale Hospital. She graduated from TCU. So she was, her and her husband quite excited on Saturday. So congrats to them as well. And Horned Frog fans everywhere, you're in the midst of having quite the season here, because your basketball team, preseason top 15, still just one loss. Your football team's going to play for national championship. It is the greatest season in TCU history. I will give a quick, as we pivot here in just a second. Here's where we are, January 1. Okay, here are the teams that were either unranked heading into the season. They're either surprising one-loss teams or they're still a bit quiet. TCU doesn't count in that because they were ranked in the preseason. 14-1 UConn, 14-1 Charleston. You got Charleston in your top 25-1?
I do not.
Okay. Fair enough. 13-1 Miami, 12-1 Mizzou, 12-1 Florida Atlantic, 12-1 K-State, and 12-1 LSU. Those are your one-loss teams that were either all of them were unranked, and some of them are still pretty quiet. And then obviously you've got Purdue and New Mexico who are still undefeated, and TCU not that far behind from what they from everyone else. They were ranked in the preseason, unlike those other teams.
All right, so that's about 10 minutes of college football / Brad Stevens locking eyes with Brad Stevens stories than anybody needed, I'm certain. So let's turn our attention to college basketball. This is a pretty good day on Saturday in that sport, highlighted, I think, by Xavier UConn. Final score, Musketeers 83, Huskies 73. Credit where credit is due. Dead leg, you called it. What did you know that led you to correctly predict Xavier's upset of the, at the time, second-ranked UConn Huskies?
I didn't think it'd wind up being a double-digit deficit, and that's what it was. But that was, Xavier closing like a 12-2. It was 71-all, I think, and then Xavier wins 83-73, so 12-2 run to close it out there. There was a Hurley technical with like 90 seconds to go, unless I missed this, and I don't know.
225.
Okay, 225 to go. Just an incredible. By the way, Saturday was awesome in terms of that 2 p.m. Eastern window of college basketball, which this preceded going into the football. Just an awesome Saturday, really. But I don't think they ever showed what Hurley did. Did you ever see this? Maybe there's someone in the chat or you.
Well, what Dan said, Dan afterwards said he said unbelievable, and he acknowledged he was frustrated by the foul, the free throw differential. UConn shot 9 free throws in the game. Xavier shot 28. And as he was talking about it after the game, he said, you realize what's happening. It's all in your head. And then he said, I wish I wouldn't have said unbelievable, in sort of a, but he, according to Dan Hurley, all he said was either after a whistle or after a no call, he said unbelievable, and they hit him with the tech. And at the time, UConn was only down 2 with 2:25 left, and that obviously sent it further in the wrong direction. You mentioned closing on the 12-2 run Xavier did. UConn was up 7 with 17:37 left, up 7, 50-43, and then Xavier outscored them 40-23 the rest of the way, including, like you noted, 12-2, down the stretch.
Yeah. What's interesting about that is the technical is in the pregame. They just did a quick, let's talk with the coach in the hallway before we get going. It was obviously a big time game there for Fox. And so they had the last question before they threw it back to the studio was, Dan, any New Year's resolutions? And he was joking. He's like, I don't know, maybe curse less, but it's the Jersey City in me. Like it's part of our vernacular. And if he actually did not curse in that moment and got in tea anyway, that's kind of soft. But it's all about, I don't know how close he was to the official, how he said it. And I understand UConn fans are not happy in terms of losing the game the way they did, the Hurley technical, whether he should have had it, the officiating overall. Didn't help yourselves by only getting to the line for 9 attempts. Only made 4 of those, by the way. I get all that. Xavier, it was a really, really good game. I won't say it was a great game. It was a really, really good game. Xavier deserved to win. It was a competitive game. They pulled away late. Xavier was the better team, and it deserved to win. And kind of the reason why we both picked Xavier to cover, I thought Xavier would win straight up, is offensively, Xavier has looked like it can go with just about any team in the country. And going into that game, let me bring up both their profiles here. Both teams were top 10 in offensive efficiency. UConn is now 9. Xavier 7. I want to say Xavier was 6 before that game. So it might have even dropped a spot in the 24 hours since this has happened there. But Xavier still ranks top 5 in 3-point accuracy. When Zach Fremantle is able to consistently put up a game like he did here, 16-11, I think it was his 5th double-double this season, that's mega. Colby Jones has a great knack for how to both get to the rim. Like, he's going to be a draft pick, and he'll probably be a draft pick this June. I don't think he's going to stick around one more year. And I don't know if he'll go as high as 20, 22, 24, if he'll slip back to the late 30s or 40s. He deserves to be an NBA pick because he rarely makes bad plays. He's got to up himself defensively, and he's got to be a little bit better with the ball overall. But he had a lot of spots in this game where just a lot of tension back and forth, and he came through with the bucket they needed. He had 16 along with Fremantle, and then Nunji, who was sick, but he managed to play, gave him 15. Jerome Hunter came off the bench to give him 15. And then Souley Boom has been probably the biggest big play player for them. He was simply okay. He had 11 in this one, and they got what they needed out of him. Andre Jackson had a few more plays. There's just no one like him. I've said it before. He was good, but they need more than just him and Sanogo there. Jackson to 14, 8 assists, 10 boards. Sanogo, 18 points, 6 boards overall. And it was a good spirited performance by UConn, but Xavier overall, I don't know. It was better. It proved it was top 15 material at this point. It's 12-3 overall. It's the first 4-0 record for Xavier in Big East play since it joined the league in 2013. That's certainly also notable. Xavier and Providence are the only undefeated teams in Big East play at this point. And good stuff for X, good stuff for the Big East, because had UConn won, it just would have kept UConn at the absolute forefront of the Big East race discussion. And as we curl into 2023 here, there's a real discussion to be had with Xavier and UConn. Marquette's done okay for itself. We'll see if Creighton can get it back together. And then Providence, although it doesn't rate as well at this point, and might have some lingering cynics after last season. Providence, like Xavier, is 4-0. Those are the only 2 unbeaten teams in that conference.
Some people are pointing out in the YouTube comments that among the reasons there was a free throw disparity is because UConn took a lot of threes and Xavier really didn't. UConn took 37 threes in the game. Xavier took 13. So obviously when you take, in UConn's case, the majority of your field goal attempts are from beyond the arc, you're not going to draw as many fouls. And that is why, and I should clarify, I wasn't pointing out the free throw disparity. I was quoting Dan Hurley, who pointed out the free throw disparity in trying to explain why he, was frustrated in that moment. I sort of roll my eyes every time I see fans tweeting about we've been called for 8 fouls and they've only been called for 2, or they've shot 24 free throws and we've only shot 7. Well, that doesn't mean anything to me. Tell me about the bad calls, point those out, but don't just point to a number and tell me that means the officiating isn't quality, because free throw disparity or a foul disparity doesn't in and of itself prove anything. And obviously among the reasons, if not the biggest reason that UConn didn't shoot nearly as many free throws as Xavier is because of the way those two teams attacked the offensive end of the court. Xavier ended up shooting 53.8% from the field in the game. So that's obviously concerning for UConn, but still, I didn't punish the Huskies too much for this. I dropped them from 2 to 3 in the top 25 and 1. So now my top 5 is Purdue at number 1, Houston at number 2, UConn at number 3, Arizona at number 4, and Kansas at number 5. And as I wrote in Sunday morning's top 25 and 1, I don't think there's a sensible top 5 other than that top 5. Now you can have Houston, UConn, Arizona, Kansas, in my opinion, in basically any order, but I think those are the 4 schools that have to come after Purdue on any sensible AP ballot that's going to be submitted either late Sunday night or early Monday morning. Let me run you through it real quick of the rationale. Of the 1-loss teams in the top 5, Arizona obviously has the worst loss. That's a loss to Utah. And of the 1-loss teams in the top 5, Kansas or Arizona probably has the best win. So again, as long as you've got Houston, UConn, Arizona, Kansas, 2, 3, 4, 5 in some order, you're probably fine. Putting them, at 2, 3, 4, 5 right after Purdue at number 1, because Purdue is, now the only undefeated team with more than 1 quadrant 1 win, and Purdue has 5 quadrant 1 wins, which is tied with Arizona for most in the country. So the Boilermakers really on Monday in the AP poll should be a unanimous number 1. I don't know if they will be, but they should be. And then after that, it should be Houston, UConn, Arizona, Kansas, because those are the only 1-loss teams ranked in the top 30 of the net that also have at least 3 quadrant 1 wins. Like Miami, the Hurricanes look great, and that's a 1-loss team as well. But they're 33rd in the net. They've got 3 quadrant 1 wins, but are not in the top 30 of the net. Houston, UConn, Arizona, Kansas are all in the top 6 of the net. So those are the teams that should be 2 through 5 on every sensible ballot Monday. We'll see if AP voters get that part right.
All right. What else stood out to you? Early, as we kind of roll through this episode here, I think UConn Xavier was the best matchup, wound up being a pretty good game. What's kind of next in line on the assembly line for you, GP?
Well, UConn wasn't the only ranked team to lose on the road this weekend, and we're going to touch on some other games that fall into that category next. But first, a word from our partners.
We are charged to protect these kids.
Go. I'm a police officer for North Minneapolis and coach for North High School.
Go.
These kids don't trust cops.
It's definitely a difficult time right now.
Kind of weird, but I'm building bonds with police.
The violence is nonstop. You can hear the gunshots. When them lights flicker at 7 o'clock, you ain't hearing none of that.
So UConn wasn't the only ranked team to lose on the road this weekend. Number 12 at the time, Baylor, was upset 77-62 at unranked Iowa State. And number 24 at the time, West Virginia, lost 82-76 in OT at unranked Kansas State. Did either of those results surprise you much? I think you and I both picked Kansas State to beat West Virginia. So that one wasn't surprising. You surprised Baylor got handled like that?
Yeah, I don't have much on Kansas State. Well, Kansas State remains a good story, deserves to be in the AP rankings when those were fresh on Monday afternoon. And West Virginia needed a shot at the end of regulation to even get it to OT, and then K-State wound up handling it there and had a good game from Marquise Noel, who went for 23. And, it's a tough spot for West Virginia on the road. West Virginia doesn't have a quality win yet, so they're still the Big 12's the most highly rated conference in the country, and there's a lot of good teams that are highly rated, and I get all that, and all the preseason bias hasn't filtered out yet. Just got to see something from West Virginia, and we'll wait and see on that. We'll touch on them briefly at the end of the episode with games coming up this weekend. The Baylor stuff is certainly notable for both ends. So no LJ Cryer for Baylor, which is obviously that's going to matter. That's going to be a big factor there. And not having LJ Cryer and his 3-point shooting ability, this is the third time in the past 5 games he has been unavailable. It's going to have an impact there. And Baylor now is 10-3. Its losses against Virginia back in November. It lost at Marquette. Remember, it got rolled, and then it was able to pull off 5 wins in a row. The most notable by far being the win over Gonzaga. But then here, it gets rolled again on the road the way that it did against Marquette there. So maybe some initial signs of just, I don't know. It's not that Baylor, I don't think, will remain in the rankings for the majority of the rest of the season, but the Baylor teams of the past 2 or 3 years just weren't as likely to do this. And I think, while I remind listeners, without any hint of pride here, that Keontae George was my preseason pick for National Player of the Year. He has not been that to this point. And when you consider George, Flagler, and Cryer as a collective, they're just a little step below with what Baylor's had from a backcourt sense in recent seasons. So, we wait and see. Their next game is going to be Tuesday, home against TCU, and then they're going to be home against K-State. Then they're at West Virginia. Certainly at 0-1 in the Big 12, they could turn around and be 3-1, and maybe things will steady themselves. But I think it is just a little bit eyebrow raising that they've had 2 games where they've been absolutely rolled. GP for Iowa State, real quick, and then take it away here. Another good game from Gabe Kalshier, who was awesome in the win over UNC when I saw him out in Portland. He had 5 threes, had 23 overall, and Iowa State did come back. They were down early. They were down 9 in the first half, and this is a team and a program that had lost 6 consecutive games against Baylor. So you end that, and in getting this win, TJ Otzelberger now has, Iowa State fans really got to be breathing some fresh oxygen at this point, because no, you don't have the most cosmetically appealing team in the country. We get all that. They're going to be defense first. A lot of the wins are going to be ugly, whatever. You're going to take wins however you can get them, and Otzelberger has completely flipped that program in ways that are borderline historic, if not overall historic, because they only won 2 games the season before he got there. This was his 7th win in a year and a half on the job over a ranked opponent, okay? He is proving to that fan base and teams inside that conference, obviously you're going to have more opportunities, but he's done it in non-con and league play, that Iowa State, particularly at home, it's going to have a shot against pretty much almost any team it plays, because of how Otzelberger was able to continue to build that roster and change the mindset of that team. So I thought Caleb Grill had a really, really good game. I think he might have finished with 20. He was also good and hit some big buckets there to kind of keep Iowa State from having any kind of sniff of danger from Baylor in the second half. So I actually thought it was equal parts takeaway for both of those teams, but Iowa State getting that win is just another. They could wind up being a team that gets a better seed than last season. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like they were in 11 when they danced in March last year. And because they're going to go in the Big 12 and they're going to take some hits on the chin, some losses are going to rack up. When you see what they did in non-con play and more quad ones coming down the road, they might be one of those classic cases of a team that you look up and you say that record doesn't look that great, but they've got a 5 or a 6 or a 7 next to their name because they're going to have so many quad one opportunities and quad one wins that it's going to validate a really good seed when we get to March.
Let me shine a light on Kansas State for a minute, because you mentioned TJ Otzelberger flipping that Iowa State program. Jerome Tang has done the same thing. Kansas State started this season 77th at KenPom. Wildcats are now up to number 46 with a 12-1 record, featuring this win over West Virginia, up to 29th in the net, 17th KPI, 40th at Torvik. And this is a program that finished next to last in the Big 12 last season. They removed Bruce Weber, hired Jerome Tang. This is the result. And just like we talked about Dennis Gates on a previous podcast last week, like, it is exactly the same recipe at Kansas State. 7 of the top 8 scorers at KSU are transfers in their first year of the program. Transfers Jerome Tang enrolled. It's highlighted, of course, by Keontae Johnson, the Florida transfer, but 7 of the top 8 in total are first-year transfers in the program. You got a JUCO transfer, an Arkansas State transfer, Virginia Tech transfer, a Mississippi State transfer, a Hofstra transfer, a Stony Brook transfer. And this is why Louisville fans don't want to hear about how difficult things are or how it takes time. Like, Dennis Gates took over a bad situation at Missouri, remade the roster with transfers, and has a good team in year 1. Jerome Tang took over a bad situation at Kansas State, remade the roster with transfers, has a good team in year 1. That's why the excuses at Louisville after the Cardinals just got blown out again, they're just excuses. Rebuilding no longer takes time. It can be done in one offseason with the right coach.
And the right scheduling. Let's also include that. Some generous scheduling also aids this transition.
There is no question, but I don't think Kansas State or Missouri are merely byproducts of schedules, and I don't think Louisville, to the other end of the spectrum, is a byproduct of a ridiculously tough schedule. I think that what's happening at Kansas State and Missouri is the byproduct of them hiring 2 coaches who recognized how to flourish in the transfer portal immediately. And Louisville, not trying to be mean, just trying to be honest, seems to have hired somebody who didn't quite either didn't understand how important it was or how possible it was, or just did not get the job done. But we just watched TJ Otzelberger last year rebuild Iowa State in one off season, and now Dennis Gates and Jerome Tang are doing the same thing at Missouri and Kansas State. Next up for KSU is at Texas on Tuesday, and then at Baylor on Saturday. So this could be a back-to-earth week for the Wildcats. We can all acknowledge that. Either way, the point remains the same. Jerome Tang built a quality team out of basically nothing in one offseason, and he is now the latest Scott Drew assistant to show he's got the stuff to be a successful head coach.
Agreed. Thoughts on my Baylor ISU takes?
Yeah, Baylor has they've been so good in recent years that you just don't expect them to lose as often as they've lost this season,
or just how they've lost. That's more of it to me. Like, if they lost by 3 points, that's completely reasonable. This was just weird, them blowing the lead and then Iowa State, running away from it.
Yeah, it's possible we're gonna reach the conclusion that Baylor isn't just as good. It just isn't as good as most of us thought Baylor would be in the preseason. Still a good team. I mean, they've got some good wins, but they've lost a lot more than they usually lose, or than I would have thought they would have lost before the calendar hit January 1st. And then with Iowa State, I think really what we're going to find out is this is just the Big 12. Like, I don't know where you can go in the Big 12 on the road and expect to play okay and win. Like, you got to go play well at every road environment in the Big 12, or you can get caught. I don't care who you are. Kansas, Texas, Texas Tech, Baylor, you got to go play well on the road to avoid getting beat. Because anybody in the Big 12, I think, with a home court advantage and a poor performance from the opponent can win that game. And that's not true in any other league. Like, you don't have to be sharp in every ACC road game to win if you're good. You don't have to be sharp in every SEC road game to win if you're good. You got to be something close to sharp in every Big 12 road game to win, even if you're good. And that makes it the most challenging league in the country, and I think the best league in the country.
Let me keep it in the Big 12 here since we're talking this, because the second game on Saturday in the triple header was Kansas, Oklahoma State, and KU, coincidentally enough, closed out the year with an homage to its biggest win of the year against UNC in the title game, and at home Saturday against the Pokes. The Jayhawks overcame 15-point halftime deficits to win. So how apropos of Kansas to do that. Surprisingly enough, and this is obviously via KU stats and information, their SID, the 15-point halftime deficit at Fog Allen was the largest overcome by Kansas in that building. It matched it. They did it in 2014 against Florida, and they did it back in 95 against the UCLA team that was coming off winning the national championship 7-8 months before. Shouts to the great Toby Bailey there. So Kansas obviously doesn't often fall behind by as many as 15 by the break when it's time for a breather in that joint. But I was a little surprised they had never had a larger comeback from a halftime deficit than what they matched there. We'll get to the penultimate play of the game here in just a second. I will note that DeJuan Harris is rising on my list of favorite college players to watch because he is a pass first, pass second, pass third college point guard. I love these kind of players. He had 9 assists, only 1 turnover in this game. And it is so clear that Bill Self trusts Harris on a level where he has with some of his previous really, really good point guards there. There was no timeout called late. KJ Adams had the heads up gimme of a bucket with 4.8 seconds to go that wound up being the winning margin there. That came, 40 seconds after Kevin McCullough hit a corner 3. McCullough didn't even have that great of a game. He was a loud presence in the final 90 seconds or so, but Jalen Wilson had 20 more, and Adams was 6 of 6 from the floor with 4 rebounds in just 23 minutes. There's just a lot here for Kansas to like. Oklahoma State played better than an average game. Oklahoma State probably played like an A- level game, but Kansas had a 17-2 run in the second half from like the 16-minute mark to about 11 minutes to go. That's when they were able to really push back, make the charge, and get the game back to where it was in doubt. And between that, shooting 48% from 3, its best so far this season, those are all factors that led to it. But obviously, we're gonna if you got this ready, go ahead and roll this, because the McCullough block on Bryce Thompson right before the game ended was what was controversial, and I think he's got the video. Go ahead, Nada.
Oh, wow, that was a foul. I've seen it from the back angle. Clearly a foul. Bryce Thompson should have been at the line. That's a tough one.
Now, appreciate Clark Kellogg's commentary on that. When the play happened, Parrish, and Thompson was terrific. I think he had 23 on 7, and he hit 7 3-pointers. He hit the 3 that tied it with 15 seconds to go. Really, really good performance by Bryce Thompson. Big picture for Oklahoma State. You got enough in that game where the record isn't that good right now, but there's got to be belief that you can be one of those teams that either finishes 4th, 5th, 6th, or 7th in the league standings, and that's going to be enough to get you in the Big 12 standings. The loss is a stinging one because it's at Fog Allen. Like, I get it. I understand entirely. You go into that building, and it's like spirits take over the souls of the officials calling it. I understand. Anyone who saw the way Oklahoma State lose that game and has followed Big 12 basketball for 2 years or 62 years is not surprised by how it ended. In real time, I thought it was clean by McCullough. After seeing the replay, I leaned toward our colleague Clark Kellogg. I actually thought he got him with a little bit too much of the body. And if that's a play with 13 minutes to go in the second half, maybe it gets called. Your thoughts, Parrish?
Lean toward? He hit him in the head. He hit him in the head, bro. Like, this highlight is why I wish Elon Musk would just run Twitter straight into the ground and we could all be done with it.
I was trying to be diplomatic in me setting you up, but fair enough.
Because I just retweeted the video and I was like, man, because I felt like I just had this moment where I was like, man, Mike Boynton, this guy can't catch a break. Like, he gets his program gets a postseason ban, in a time where like nobody else is getting postseason bans, and he's just sitting over there, and like we're not assuming, like we know he's just sitting over there, like WTF, and then like he's got an opportunity to win at Kansas. Now, let's be fair. Even if Bryce Thompson goes to the free throw line in those circumstances, he probably ain't making 2. Statistically speaking, he's not making 2. But he should have been at the free throw line with an opportunity to tie the score and possibly send it to overtime. I just thought that was something that replay I could put on Twitter, and everybody'd be like, oh, yeah, wow. Kansas got away with one there. And then we'd just be done with it. Just move on to the next game. Instead, I had for about 12 hours people arguing in my mentions about whether it was a foul or not a foul. As if what? Like, I swear to God, like the only thing I care about as much as Kansas fans care about Kansas would be probably the New York Mets, right? And I could, if you told me the Mets got, like, if there was some controversial play, like there was a controversial play a few years ago where Michael Conforto like didn't make an attempt to get out of the way of a pitch. It's like a breaking ball, and he sort of leaned into it. He had all the gear on and just sort of leaned into it. I think it was bases loaded, and they caught it a hit batter, and it ended the game. And people were like, he didn't even try to get out of the way. You have to attempt. That's the rule. You've got to attempt to get out of the way. And he clearly didn't attempt to get out of the way. He kind of leaned into it. And I'm a Mets fan. I was really happy the Mets won that game. I don't care how they won it. I was just happy it was a win instead of a loss. But, when I looked at the replay, I think I even tweeted about it at the time. I was like, well, of course, that's terrible. Like he didn't attempt to get out of the way. Like the Mets got away with one. I'm glad they did. But of course, I'm looking at the same thing you're looking at. And I don't know why even diehard Kansas fans can't look at that and go, okay, I'm glad we got away with that. But we didn't get away with that. Like people actually arguing it was not a foul. Bryce Thompson got hit in the head, bro. That's a foul. You can't hit the shooter in the head.
This is a shouts to C-Rad in the chat going, biased takes on social media? You're kidding.
It's just like, but it's like, what are we arguing about? How do you even start the argument of, I don't think it looks clean to me. Looks clean to you. He hit him in the head.
Yeah, you alerted me to the fact I did not realize Bryce Thompson, who is hitting 41% of his three-pointers, is only making 56% of his foul shots. He's only gotten the line 25 times in 13 games. This is a 6'6" wing who you need to be a scorer/shooter. So duly noted on that. I didn't realize he was that poor from the line there. So, yeah, a little bit rough. By the way, Kansas has won 32 consecutive in a row straight conference openers. Its first Big 12 game for the past 32 seasons has gone Kansas's way. And for the 10th time in Bill Self's 20 seasons, so 50% hit rate on this, Kansas has won at least 12 of its first 13 games. Jayhawks fans are living large. What else stood out to you from the weekend, GP?
Well, UNC dropped to 9-5 with a loss at Pitt. Tar Heels are now 4-5 in their past 9 games with 3 losses to sub-30 KenPom teams. I'm not going to do it again. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, boy, they're just not any good, but they're certainly not playing well. There's no getting around that. There's plenty of time to turn it around, just like they turned it around last season. But they're not playing well. Happy for Jeff Capel to get that. That's a big win for his program. But, I didn't expect the preseason number 1 team in the AP poll to be 9-5 through 14 games or go 4-5 through literally any 9-game stretch.
Yeah, agreed. We aren't going to play the Carolina tune on every single pod, but it's obviously a notable loss. It was back on Friday with all that. Personal side note, one of my brothers got one of my sons this 007 Lego car replica thing. So it was way more complicated than I thought it was going to be. So with about 18 minutes to go in the second half, I was like, we had the game on. I was like, I think I can get this done by like the under 8. And it gets to like 3 minutes to go. And we're like 50% done. I'm like, son, I got to watch it. I got to watch Pitt basketball right now. And so we did, finally got it done. A fun little memory there. But my son, my oldest son, he's like, who's Pitt? I'm like, it's so existential. And then on Saturday, kids will say the darndest things, right? So I think it was right before he might have gone to bed with the first game in the college football playoff. He goes, Dad, why are coaches always so mean? I'm like, or no, why do coaches have to be mean all the time? Is what he said. I was like, it's interesting. They don't have to be. And so I was trying to explain to him the dynamic because he's young, he's first grader. Whenever he sees a coach, or many times when he sees a coach on screen, they look pissed off. They're yelling. And so my wife was like, well, sometimes in a football game, the players are really far away on the field. It was one of those things where it's like, no, you have a valid point. Not everyone. Shouts to Brett Stevens. Not everyone's always mean all the time, but it was an interesting observation.
Well, like I swear to you, I was thinking about this earlier today. Like, and I was sort of thinking about it from the perspective of Dan Hurley, because he's clearly one of the coaches who has the most famous breakdowns on the sideline. Coaches act so crazy, not all, but some, so crazy on the sideline that we just sort of go, well, that's just what coaching is. But like, imagine if that's the way other jobs worked. Like, imagine if you worked in an office building and every time something went kind of wrong with your job, you just started stomping around and yelling and waving your arms and stuff. Like, people would think you're a lunatic. But because coaches just do it all the time and have done it forever, we're like, yeah, that's just coaching. But I don't believe that has to be coaching. I don't think you have to coach by yelling and screaming and being mad all the time. Like, clearly it works for some people, but I don't think that, like, you do it because you have to do it. I just fundamentally don't believe that. And I do think it's wild if you can separate it from what you've always seen and just sort of, like your son did, have a fresh look at it with no perspective. Yep. And you don't know this is the way it's always been because you don't know anything about anything. But you see it and you go, man, this is kind of weird. Why are these people always so mad? It's a wild deal.
It was almost like the way it was like a beat of just no talking in my house with two young boys. That doesn't happen frequently. So it was like a beat of silence. And then the tone he said it in was almost as if I put something he had never seen before on his plate. The way he just said it, it was like, it was dawning on him. Like every time because we have hoops and football on the house and the lot. And he just asking a very pointed, straight, innocent question about why do coaches have to be mean all the time? And I just what is Pitt? What does Pitt actually make me what does Pitt make me laugh out loud? But hey, congrats to Pitt. They get the win. Jamarius Burton, 31 points in that. Pitt is 3-0 in ACC play for the first time since 15-16. Has not been 4-0 since the 13-14 season. The next game is a home one against Virginia. If you win that, Pitt, then we'll really be talking. I do want to mention Marquette got another good win against Villanova. Villanova, again, it's looking better, but it's taking these losses that need to be wins. You took on too much water in non-conference play, so the Wildcats are in real danger of not making the NCAA tournament. They're going to have to steal some on the road. This one was a home loss there. Stevie Wilson and Cam Jones played well for Marquette, so shouts to Marquette for getting another good win there. And then I will note Texas got a win on the road against Oklahoma, 70-69. Longhorns are now 5-0 without Chris Beard, and it's the first time since 2009-2010 Texas started 17-0 that season. This is the best start for that program this deep into a season in that amount of time. So there was, we'll get to the Sunday stuff in a second here, but that was some more Saturday stuff that stuck out to me. What about you?
Well, let's just go straight to Sunday because just earlier I was watching, and by watching, I mean, I had it on. I had it on. At some point you don't need to watch anymore, but like Maryland got crushed again. Mm-hmm. 3 games ago, lost by 27 at home to UCLA. And then on Sunday afternoon, lost by 35 to Michigan. And that's a Michigan team that has been disappointing this season. Michigan started the season in the preseason, started the season in the top 25, but this Michigan team has lost to Arizona State, which is outside of the top 50 at KenPom. And then last Thursday, lost to Central Michigan. So Michigan lost to Central Michigan by 2 on Thursday.
After we finished the pod, they were spared on that episode because the game wasn't done when we wrapped on that. So we actually never even wound up talking about that one.
And then 3 days later, they beat Maryland by 35 points. What?
That's a Maryland team you had like top 10 at one point, right?
I put them back in the top 25 and won at some point last week just because I needed somebody. I keep it down to about 30, 31. And when I got to remove somebody, I just move somebody up. So Maryland moved back up. But boy, I can't get them out of there fast enough this time.
I was wrong.
Maryland's got to go. I'm going to actually open up 2 spots in the top 25 and 1 before I go to bed tonight. Maryland will be removed after this loss to Michigan, and Memphis will be removed after its Sunday afternoon loss down at Tulane.
You got room for Wake Forest in there? Out of curiosity, I'll just mention them real quick. They've beaten Duke and Virginia Tech. North Carolina's next. Tyree Appleby had a good showing in the Virginia Tech game. They quite Good enough for maybe just on
not really on my radar. They've got 3 sub-60 KenPom losses to Loyola Marymount, Clemson, LSU. They're 87th at KenPom. I'm not afraid to rank somebody in the top 25 and 1 who isn't even in like the top 40 or 50 or maybe even 60 at KenPom. But when you have more questionable losses than most of my ranked teams do, and then the computer numbers don't help you at all, I tend to stay away from you. I think right now I'm looking at teams like, I actually made a list. Let me look at it and put it in the top.
At it. I also got that Wisconsin win, so they just got a weird resume. That's why I asked.
Yeah, no, I've got a list. Like Florida Atlantic is on my list as somebody.
Charleston better damn well be on your list.
Okay, they are on my list, and I would like to do it because, like, I saw a clip floating around earlier with Pat Kelsey being asked about it, and I hate it when coaches say stuff like, "Oh yeah, don't worry about rankings; it doesn't matter." Because like they do matter. They matter in so many ways. They keep you on the default scoreboard of everybody's app. Like the default scoreboard you go to on your CBS Sports app for college basketball, it's going to be a top 25 scoreboard. Suddenly you're visible in ways that you otherwise aren't visible. You want to know that, like, here's to the point. Michigan lost to Central Michigan last Thursday night. You want to know the truth? I didn't know it till Friday morning because they weren't on the default scoreboard. I woke up and had a text from somebody saying, "Hey, what'd you think of that?" And so when you're ranked, you're visible.
Way to wake up, by the
way. Well, I mean, that wasn't I didn't want to say the quote that
text message arrived at 7:14 a.m. How do you think about those Michigan?
It was something. It was something that drew my attention to Central Michigan. So it makes you visible in ways you otherwise wouldn't be visible. It gets you on the ticker. On CBS Sports Network, on ESPN, it gets your highlights played on Sports Center and Inside College Basketball. Like any coach who says it doesn't matter is just is either just being difficult to be difficult or not smart enough to understand all the ways that it actually does matter. My point is this: I saw a clip with Pat Kelsey earlier today where he was acknowledging he would love it for how much it would mean to his school and his players and how it would help in recruiting and what it would mean to the city of Charleston. So Charleston is on my radar, but if I'm being honest, it's not the type of team I would rank. They do have a win over Virginia Tech, but that's really it in terms of notable wins. And, I'm not sure how good that win over Virginia Tech is at this point. The lone loss is to North Carolina, but like we said, North Carolina is 4-5 in its past 9. So they got a loss to a team that I don't have ranked. They haven't beaten a team I have ranked, and the computer numbers are not great. 89th at KenPom for 1. And so I will have no issue with any AP voter who puts Charleston on a ballot. It's fine with me because I'd be happy to do it. And I guess you can just point to 14-1 with the lone loss to North Carolina and say that's good enough. But based on the way I tend to do things, I don't think Charleston makes the cut right now.
All right, that's fair. On your Maryland-Michigan note, Maryland had 13 points in the first half. It was the lowest by an opponent against Michigan in its modern era. I don't know how far back the modern era goes, but let's call it at least 40 years, right? So, and by the way, the last time Michigan held an opponent to fewer than 20 points in the first half was Maryland a year ago. Yeah. Those are now conference mates, obviously. So Maryland cannot get out of scheduling Michigan, but that's not going so well for them. Nice win for Michigan to kind of turn that around a little bit. But Maryland is, whoo, boy, it's up there with being as polarizing from a resume standpoint as just about anyone. Before we preview,
real quick, I mentioned because I never went back to that list. I'm going to remove Maryland, going to remove Memphis, and then I've got a list of teams I'm looking at. Florida Atlantic is one of them. I think you can justify. Marquette, as you noted, got another nice win. I think you can justify that. West Virginia, even coming off of a loss to Kansas State, you can still easily justify West Virginia in your rankings. You could put Kansas State in there. I think that's something, you can defend that. Auburn, you can defend. Iowa State, you can defend. So I'm not sure. I have to really look at it, but I imagine I'll be filling those 2 spots in the top 25 and 1 with some combination: Kansas State, Auburn, West Virginia, Marquette, Florida Atlantic, Iowa State.
All right, 2 quickies on Sunday games before we just give you the heads up on what to look for on Monday and Tuesday. 1, in the preseason, I said that Iowa would not be a tournament team, and it's now 8-6, losers of 3 consecutive. Eastern Illinois, just hideous beyond belief home loss. Tried to walk into Pinnacle, failed on Thursday, and then lost Sunday at Penn State. Iowa's got to fix some stuff. We'll see if it can or can't. I don't know. We'll see. Penn State's the story here. 11-3. You don't have them ranked. That's fair. The losses are all respectable at this point, and Jalen Pickett has been one of the most improved players in the country to this point. Iowa came back late. It was actually, they were up like 22, 23 points. I got my kids down early before we did this pod, and then when I came back down, there was like 30 seconds to go, and Iowa cut it to 2. So I missed how Iowa actually got that down before ultimately losing 83-79. Chris Murray did play well. He had 32 in that game. They obviously need him, but Pickett had 26 in this one, and he has been awesome. Penn State, when Micah took over, they had the expected first year, right? It was 14-17, kind of getting back to what you mentioned at the top of the show. But this is year 2 now, and this team is just so much different offensively. It's the best team statistically right now with the ball in its hands. It turns it over on fewer of its possessions than any team in the country. The Big Ten there will be a way where some teams that were in the dance last year, they're not going to get there this year. And the ones that weren't are. Penn State is tracking toward this. It's still plenty of work to do. Don't get me wrong, but Penn State winning 11 of its first 14 games is a notable thing. I don't have it in front of me in the past 30. I'll guess. How about this? Past 30 seasons, Penn State started 11-3 or better. In the past 30 seasons, someone fact check me this and find me at Matt Norlander on Twitter. I'm going to say that's happened. I'll say 3 times in 30 seasons, Penn State started 11-3 or better. So it's notable in and of itself that they did that. And then one more thing here quick. As we watch this game might end just as we're wrapping up, but maybe not. Butler is winning 75-46 at Georgetown. Butler's going to get a win in the Big East. Georgetown's going to remain winless. The only reason why I bring this up, because we do not need to just go after Georgetown every single episode, but I did see the Twitter account Hilltop Hoops, who I think documents every single time we talk about Georgetown on this podcast. I'm seeing that there was someone with a Save G-Town B-Ball sign, and then I don't know if this is the same sign and it was just turned around or if these are 2 different signs, but there's another sign that says New Year, New Coach, We Want Change. And according to Hilltop Hoops, it took arena security 8 minutes and 31 seconds of game time to confiscate my sign tonight. So I guess this is the actual person behind the account. When I asked the usher why it was being taken, he said, quote, Georgetown does not want any antagonistic signs in the arena, end quote. I asked who gave the instruction, and he would only say, quote, the call came from the floor, end quote. Hey, Georgetown, when you do this kind of stuff, it only brings more negative attention upon your program and gets more of a bigger, brighter, hotter light on just how terrible Patrick Ewing is doing. This actually does not help matters. If you simply let someone hold up a sign, hope it doesn't show up on television, a game barely anyone's watching, because let's be honest, it's 8-6 Butler against 5-9 Georgetown. It doesn't get mentioned on a national college basketball podcast, but stuff like this, when it's only going to make the problem worse. So I wanted to point it out on the podcast. Georgetown is set to drop to 5-10, and 2023 is starting out no better than 2022 ended.
All right, so let's look ahead to the next 2 nights. Monday, we've got Rutgers at number 1 Purdue. Boilermakers trying to remain undefeated, just like New Mexico. West Virginia at Oklahoma State is also on Monday night. Then Tuesday, pretty good schedule. Mississippi State at Tennessee, LSU at Kentucky, Kansas at Texas Tech, Kansas State at Texas, Virginia at Pitt. What are you looking most forward to there?
Did you not mention? First of all, you fly tomorrow.
Fly tomorrow. In studio Tuesday night, Wednesday night.
Okay, so I'm going to start with one. Unless I missed it here, you did not mention the undefeated New Mexico Lobos at Fresno State. 11 Eastern. See, this is your late one on Tuesday. CBS Sports Network, GP will be in studio. Tune in, watch the game, see if New Mexico can keep pace with. Well, we'll see if Purdue's going to remain undefeated because it's at home Monday. By the way, let's see how good your memory is here. Preseason episode.
Mm-hmm.
We asked ourselves, would there be an undefeated team on January 1? I have the answer. Do you remember if you said yes or no?
I hope I said yes.
You said yes, and I said yes. Do you remember your team that we picked our most likely candidates? Do you remember the team you said would be most likely?
I think I said Houston.
You did say Houston.
Yeah.
Didn't make it. I said TCU.
They tried though. They tried.
I didn't, but they
tried though.
Certainly tried.
Give them credit for trying.
But to my
they tried except for the second half against Alabama. They did not try in the second half against Alabama.
I know. That's true. To my point here, we only got 2 standing here. We're on 1-123, and it's just Purdue home against Rutgers. If memory serves, it was at Rutgers last season, back when it was 2021, when Purdue got knocked and took its first L. Ron Harper Jr., right, from 40 feet. I think he hit the shot. That's so Rutgers is going in.
I do remember Rutgers ending somebody's undefeated season.
It was Purdue.
It was
I think it was Harper who hit the buzzer beater.
I remember that.
Because there was that famous call, the train is off the tracks. Oh, the train is off the tracks. that was well before you wanted to become an engineer. And then you realized you meant conductor, and it was Illinois. The train is off the tracks. That was a thing a season ago. I completely forgot about that.
I'm glad you said that. Okay, because coincidentally, I got an email today from Ryan Holt. Shouts to Ryan Holt. I'm just going to read you the email as it was sent to me. Gary, longtime listener and absolutely love the Eye on College Basketball podcast. I hope Ryan doesn't mind me sharing this. If you do, Ryan, email me again and say, hey, GP, that was out of line, but I hope it's fine. Longtime listener and absolutely love the Eye on College Basketball podcast. Was listening to the mailbag episode on my run today and happened to run by the placard for the Great Nashville Train Wreck while you were talking about it. Thought you might like to see some pics of it below. He sent me pictures of it.
Send them to Nada. Tweet that out, or you tweet it out, or you can send it from the official pod Twitter account.
I'll send it to Nada. Yeah, no, I've got right where the disaster on the train tracks in Nashville happened back in 1918. This man was listening to me talk about it. The most random thing you could ever talk about on a college basketball podcast, other than maybe premarital sex. And he's like, "Wow, I'm running past this place right now. What in the world?" That'd be like. It'd be like you running, you're on a jog and we're talking about Elvis and UMass Lowell and Graceland, and then you're just running by Graceland. Although I wouldn't advise running by Graceland.
How about that, though? We need a new placard for you destroying Illinois. That needs to go next to that. So ask Ryan if you can build something. I assume he's local. Build something. Just put it there. Don't ask. Don't look for the ordinance. Don't go to City Hall. Do it yourself. DIY. Any kind of memorial to the Illinois 22-23 season that was all GP's doing. If you could actually do that, I'm not kidding. We will publicize such matters.
Make a fake sign and put it next to that sign, and let's call that the spot where the 2 biggest train disasters in United States history happened. First, the disaster in Nashville that lost a whole bunch of lives is actually a pretty bad deal. And then, of course, when I ran the Illini train clear off the tracks.
Yeah, anywho, so yeah, New Mexico at Fresno State, 11 Eastern. That's a night game, not a morning game.
All that means I'm gonna be at work till 1:30 in the morning. That's all that means.
CBS Sports Network, and we're gonna do a Wednesday 9 a.m. podcast. You love it. Just kidding, GP. Wouldn't do that to you. Also, Marquette at St. John's, 6:30 Eastern, FS1 on Tuesday. St. John's got run 22 points against Seton Hall on Saturday. Johnny's to the St. John's fans listening, I see you. I hear you. You're like, not again. Please, not again. They had a terrible non-conference schedule in terms of who they assembled, racked up the wins, and now they're looking like frauds. We'll see if they can change that in conference play. To the other games that you mentioned, I'll just list them off real quick, 1 through 4 in terms of my intrigue. Most intrigue for me is Virginia at Pitt. Dad, what is Pitt? I'm in on that. I want to see if they can actually respond. Home court, they'll probably have Pitt might have its best home court environment for a conference game in 4 or 5 seasons here. You got a little dose of optimism. Let's see if you can get it done against Virginia. That's an 9 Eastern ACC network tip. Number 2 after that is LSU at Kentucky, 8 Eastern on ESPN. LSU has a gaudy record. Kentucky will be favored, expected to win. Let's see if it can continue to do so. It ran away from Louisville, wound up winning by 23. We wait and see. After that, Kansas State at Texas, 9 Eastern. Longhorn Network special on Tuesday there.
I've got that.
Kansas State, if it were to be able to go in and win a game there, then we're really talking about something major with that program, even beyond what it's done. And then Kansas at Texas Tech. Texas Tech took a loss. It actually blew a big lead against TCU over the weekend. And so we'll see. Texas Tech's in a spot here where, to be honest, like these are the games that has to win. Texas Tech's non-conference is terrible. Let me bring that up real quick. I'm going to do a blind guess. I'm going to say Texas Tech's non-conference schedule at KenPom. I'm going to say it's 303. I'm going to see what they're at right now. Oh my gosh. 348, my man. 348 for Texas Tech. 10-3 has no notable wins whatsoever. It is going to need to overperform in Big 12 play in order to get a bid because nothing it did in non-conference play is going to mean anything. Its best win is home against Louisiana Tech. I'm not kidding you. According to the metrics, it's Texas Tech's second best win in non-conference play was against Georgetown in Lubbock. If Georgetown is your second best non-con win, you're in severe trouble there. Texas is going to have to probably win at least 10 games in Big 12 play, so it's got a big opportunity on Tuesday at home against Kansas. That game is a 9 Eastern tip on ESPN2.
All right, we ready to get out of here?
Let's go.
Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Shouts to Huck. Shouts to Larnell. Thank you, guys, once again for listening to the Iron College Basketball Podcast. If you're not subscribed, please go subscribe anywhere you subscribe to podcasts, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. Over at Apple, 5 stars. Leave a nice review. Type some words. There's more of us than there are of them, and that needs to be reflected in the comments properly. If you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, knock that out. If you haven't hit the like button yet, please do that. And we will talk to you again at the very latest on Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern. Till then, take care.